I see Deputy Inspector Andrea. Is that you or is a representative on the line for you?
No, it's Lieutenant Taveras. DI Andre, we apologize. He had a prearranged meeting before he found out about this meeting.
Thank you. Thank you. And do we have someone from the 33rd Precinct on the line?
Okay. Okay. Goodbye.
No.
That was who?
Lucia. She's going to be an enemy. She's one of their thoughts.
She's back working.
I'm sorry?
She's back working.
Folks over to the, I like to see people, so I move all the attendees over to the panelist side. So please feel free to turn your videos on so I can see your faces. I promoted you, Jennifer, but I don't know what's going on. There we go.
Thank you.
Chanel, are you on the line? Could you send a link to Senator Jackson's? Did they receive a panelist link?
Yes,
They did?
I'll send it again.
Okay, yeah. Could you send it to Senator Jackson and CC, his chief of staff, I believe, or Chris?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Hello, hello, hello. Hi, Mariella. How are you?
Hi, Curtis. Good. How are you?
Good to see you.
Yeah.
Been a while. It is a little after 6 now, and I think we have a pretty good number of folks to go ahead and get started. And there will be others to join us. But thank you all for joining. My name is Curtis Young. I am the chair of the Public Safety Committee for Community Board 12. I believe we are joined by a few others as well from the committee. I'll just introduce you for the sake of making it easier for us all. We have Mariella Graham, who's a committee member. I should also say that committee meetings are not required to occur during the months of July and August, so our members are not required to attend the meeting as a requirement from the city charter. So not all of our committee members are present. Thank you for joining Mariella Graham. I also know that we have a few other community board members. Ruth Robertson, Sally Fisher is also on the line from the community board. I see a few others. Wendy, are you representing?
So confusing, right? I am here on behalf of We Act for Environmental Justice.
Got it. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
And I believe we will have Senator Jackson on a little bit later, as well as perhaps Carmen, Assemblywoman De La Rosa, who also RSVP. But the purpose of this meeting, our committee felt it was just important, considering all of the events that have been happening, the crime that's been happening in the community, the gun shootings in particular. We felt it was important to have to resume and have a meeting to discuss what was going on, to get an update from the precincts, and to hear other issues that you may be aware of, and talk about what is happening within the pipeline from the policy standpoint, what's happening in Albany. There's been a lot of new initiatives I'm aware of as well at the city level. So we invited some of our elected officials to come and just share some of those progressive updates that can help maybe help the situation that we've been seeing over the past few weeks go away in some way, shape, or form. So,
hey, Curtis, it's Osi. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Oh, yes. Thank you for joining. Another committee member. All right. So we're going to go ahead and dive in now. I am on the agenda for this evening. We have, one second. So we have Ebenezer, Antonio Marcel, and Ebenezer Jimmy. So I believe our Eleazar, is that you? 917-699? OC, was that you? Someone texted me. I don't know who it is.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, got it. Perfect. Thank you. So I think the first order of business is to just get some general updates on the current crime stats, what's been happening in the summer. We haven't met since June, so there's been a lot going on. So we'd love to get an update from Lieutenant Tavares from the 34th precinct, and then hopefully by the time he finishes, we'll have someone from the 3-3. Just as a general update, the commanding officer, Captain Charlie Bello, was promoted deputy inspector obviously months ago and has been transferred to a new precinct. So Deputy Inspector Bello is now in the 4-4, which is in the Bronx. So he's no longer attending these meetings. We will miss him greatly. I did have a chance to meet with him over the summer to say my goodbyes. And I also had the chance to go in and meet the new commanding officer, Commanding Officer Brian Natale, who sent me an email last week saying he was unable to attend this meeting today because he's on vacation, but he was going to try to send someone else. But he will be at our first official meeting, which is September 1st, for all of us to get to know the new commanding officer in the 33rd precinct. So without further ado, I am going to pass it to the 3-4 to give us some updates on what's been going on.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, Lieutenant Tavares. I hope everyone is doing well. So I'm going to give you the breakdown for the 28 days. So we have murder, 1 against 1. That's a 0% change. Rape, 1 against 2, for a 50% decrease. Robberies, 21 against 16, 31% increase. Felony assault, 28 versus 23, 21% increase. Burglary, 9 versus 19, 52% decrease. Grand larceny, 37 versus 30, 23% increase. GLAs, 19 versus 15, 26% increase. What we have been experiencing lately with the gun violence, most of these shootings that we are seeing are robberies gone wrong. Um, so pretty much these criminals, what they are going after is most of the time is jewelry or high-end vehicles. So pretty much you getting carjacked. Unfortunately, people are getting carjacked. They've been removed from the cars at gunpoint. Same thing with the jewelry. Is if the victim resists or attempt to flee, they are not afraid to use force, and that's the biggest problem that we are seeing right now. The detective squad has been doing great work. A lot of these guys, we already know who they are. If they haven't been arrested yet, they have something that's called iCars. So some of them flee to different states, but they have done great work. And if we don't have them yet, we know who they are. So that's pretty much what's going on in the 3-4 with the violence.
Okay. So I guess I would love to hear more about, some of the what have you been doing to help with mitigating these things from happening? Are there increased presence in certain locations? Are there, we've seen increase in presence in some locations. So is there any strategic, I guess, around
So
what areas are being targeted? Are there targeted areas? Could you just provide some clarification on what you all are doing?
So for the shootings, we do get help from the borough, and they pretty much send personnel here to the 34. I don't even know if you have seen it. And we pretty much hang out in the hot spot, like we call it, where there is restaurants, clubs. So what we have seen is that a lot of these shootings happen when the victim comes out of the restaurant or out of the club, and they might follow him or her, but usually they are not afraid to do it, like whatever they see the victim. So what we've been doing is an increasing presence. I don't know if you have seen it. We also have seen, we have a couple of shootings where illegal motorcycles have been involved. So what we've been doing regarding that, we've been doing checkpoints. 207, a lot of these guys are not from the area, so they come from the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens. So we've been doing checkpoints to increase presence, and also we've been doing, especially like Friday, Saturday, and Sundays, we have been confiscating these dirt bikes as best as we can. Obviously, we cannot chase them, but if we find them stopped somewhere and we could surround them safely before they try to take off and possibly injure somebody, we've been doing that. We have removed this past month over 50 illegal bikes, different types, 4-wheelers, even scooters. Also, like I told you, the borough, usually on the weekends, they send about 20 officers. Those officers go on foot to increase the presence. I don't know if you have seen it, but usually, especially on the weekends. Also, we do, my CEO puts out, again, mostly on the weekends, the cars. I don't know if you've seen them with the lights on. So those guys pretty much, those officers patrolling the hot spots, the areas that we have in intel that something might happen. It could be, we don't have that much gang violence here. We had a couple of incidents, so we also have a shooting order for those type of locations where there might be gang violence, let's say. And that's what the 3-4 has been doing. There has been a large increase in presence. I don't know if you have seen it, but there definitely is there.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for the update on what you have been doing and your increased presence throughout the community. I would like to take a few questions now from the committee. We will take first. Are there any hands from the committee members? I see Sally Fisher has her hand raised. Take it away, Sally.
Okay, I think I'm talking to the 34th. It's hard to tell because I'm in the middle of a restaurant. But how many summons have you issued? How many illegal vehicles have you seized? So instead of just reporting on major crimes, the quote unquote quality of life, which are actually health and public safety concerns, what are you doing to address those? And in terms of enforcement, how many tickets do you actually issue? How many bikes do you seize? How many motorists do you stop for excessive speed, et cetera? So what is actually going on to address these concerns in our community?
Actually, I couldn't really, somebody else had the mic on, so I really couldn't catch the question.
Okay, I'll repeat it. Can you hear me now?
Somebody has a, or maybe, okay, so maybe you have something in the background. Okay, go ahead.
You can hear me now?
Yes, yes, madam.
Okay, great. What I'm trying to figure out is actually what progress you made in addressing certain quality of life, which are really public health and public safety concerns, like the illegal vehicles, the dirt bikes, the ATVs, et cetera. How many summons do you actually issue to address those problems? I mean, it's okay to say that you're looking at it and you're putting people in certain locations, but unless you start addressing the problems by making it actually an enforcement initiative, we're left where we began. So I want to know what sort of results you've actually can demonstrate to the community.
So, like I stated, we have seized in the past month over 50 dirt bikes, and when we take these vehicles, we issue the summons because we cannot take it without summons. So if the bike is by itself and there is nobody, we just take the bike because it's not registered. It is in a public street. But if the owner is there, the owner is going to be issued a summons for unregistered vehicle. We've been doing operations, especially Saturdays and Sundays, addressing especially the dirt bikes because these guys ride crazy. They get on the sidewalk. They do all kind of stuff. That's how we've been addressing the
Can you quantify the results? Can you quantify? Is there data that show what the results are of those efforts?
Well, yes, we take the vehicle and we have to invoice it. So absolutely, there is paper trail.
Okay, and on how many occasions does that happen? I'm just trying to get what the numbers are. I assume there are results. I just want to know the data.
I actually have it in front of me exactly how many motorcycles we removed this month. Let me just count it one by one. Give me 1 second. You could go to the next question while I count this.
Great, thank you.
Yes, Danielle, you're up next.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My apologies for being late. So I have a question. So about, I think this was last week, there was an incident on Dykeman where it seemed like a disturbed person, I don't know exactly what happened, but somebody who seemed to have some sort of mental illness was detained by the police. And I noticed that there were between like 15 and 20 officers. And so I guess I'm just trying to understand how a decision like that was made to have 15 to 20 officers respond to that type of incident when we have, issues of gun violence in the community. And it was actually a pretty disturbing sight to just see all of these officers around somebody that was seemingly suffering from some sort of episode of something.
Well, specifically the incident you're speaking about, I do not have any information about that, so I cannot give you any input of why there were so many officers there. So I really couldn't answer that question unless I had the details. I'm not gonna speculate here of maybe this, maybe that, but I cannot answer that question because I don't have the when it was. If you give me the information, I might be able to get back to you.
This was on Wednesday at 4:30.
What's the location?
This was on Wednesday at 4:30. This is a picture of the incident.
What's the
You see
location?
that?
Yeah, I see the picture.
It's on
What's the location?
Dykeman.
Dykeman and what?
This was on Dykeman and Vermilia.
Dykeman and what?
And Vermilia, between Vermilia and Broadway. Yeah, I guess
you have-
it's just sort of surprising that there aren't any details considering about 20 officers were at this incident.
Like I said, I don't know what happened that day, but I could try to find out for you.
Okay,
Um,
thank you.
We can also send a follow-up email, Danielle. I can give you Peter and the deputy inspector's email. We can reach out to him directly to ask that question as well. All right.
Regarding the dirt bikes, we seized a total of 66 dirt bikes in the 28 days.
Yeah, you hear that, Sally? It's 66 is the number. Thank you. All right. So I know we have a few more questions and comments coming up, but I wanted to yield to our elected officials who are joining us today. There's been a lot of talk on efforts to mitigate gun violence in the community, so I really wanted to get an update on what some of those initiatives that gone are, so we can maybe ask some questions about these efforts as well. So first up, I see Senator Jackson. I'm going to turn it over to you, Senator, if you're ready.
Thank you, Curtis, and good evening, everyone, and to the commanding officers. I believe that Peter Andrea is the 34th. Do we have the 33rd?
Can you guys hear me? It's Lieutenant Zambrano. How you doing?
Yes, how are you?
Yeah,
great.
good. I didn't want to interrupt a little early. My apologies. So,
I'll circle back around to you after we get through we have Senator Jackson and Assembly.
no problem. No problem.
Okay, got it.
Obviously, the most pressing, I've said loud and clear to any precinct or any community board that I go to, is the safety and security of the people that I represent. And I'm sure that all of you feel the same way. And if not, then we really have to discuss it. When I say all of you, everyone here on this Zoom call. But obviously the incidence of violence and shooting and killing is absolutely going crazy. And we collectively, NYPD and the community, we must pull resources together in order to combat that by communicating and educating people, also making sure that all of the videos and buildings and department stores and everything like that are available if in fact something happens, that we can catch these individuals. I read today about several people were apprehended who shot and killed this young man about 6:30 in the morning, about a block from his building, standing against his car, when the report in the paper said that they pulled out a gun and asked for his chain, and he refused, and they killed him. This is absolutely crazy type of activity that we need to try to stop by educating people about the situation that brings about the violence. Obviously, when people are out, I believe it's occurring at a lot of night spots around the entire area, but education is the key to uplift all people. And I want to make sure that we work together with the police and community to try to make sure that everyone is safe. That's my primary concern. And obviously the dirt bikes, I was walking across the street at 183rd and 4 Washington, going to my house, waiting. A car was coming up the hill, and so I'm waiting. And then this person on these one-wheelers were coming up the hill, and he was coming pretty fast, and he had his light on. It was a light on there. But someone came out of the cross street at 183rd on a dirt bike, no light, no nothing, and almost hit the man. And I was like, oh my gosh. And he also was like shocked. That's how close it was. So we have to somehow get that under control. And if in fact, if they're parked and they're dirt bikes are illegal in New York City. Regardless if in fact, if they have a permit to own a dirt bike, meaning the owner, they're illegal in New York. And if they're on the streets, in my opinion, they should be taken off the streets. So that's my 2 cents. I mean, obviously I know it's not as easy as it sounds, but we all have to work together. Thank you, Curtis, for holding this. This is important. Speak out. with people in the community about the issues and concerns about violence and gun violence and dirt bikes and all the other things that are quality of life issues that are affecting all of our lives.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us, Senator.
Thank
I do have one question for you. I know recently the governor resigned, but before he resigned, he declared a state of gun violence emergency, and there was going to be resources available. Do you think that a gun violence declaration is going to continue, and the lieutenant governor is going to take on that effort as well?
Yes, absolutely. You know, one person doesn't stop any show going forward. And so hopefully all of the commissioners and what have you, obviously that we're going to be, we, meaning elected public officials, are going to be talking to the lieutenant governor's office about that. And I asked the question, so what happens when a lieutenant governor replaces a governor? Who is the lieutenant governor? The acting lieutenant governor becomes Andrew Stewart Cousins, the majority leader, until the governor appoints someone that has to be confirmed by the state senate.
Okay, great.
So I would say yes, the continuation of that is going to continue.
Okay, got it. And just so everyone knows, like, I'm sure my committee members are aware that there was a declaration of gun violence in the state. It was the first in the nation declaration of gun violence. And because of that, a lot of additional efforts are in the pipeline, are in works to help create programs for communities, particularly for young people, to keep them off the street and give them alternatives to violence. So that's what I refer to when the governor made that statement. So we have a few hands raised, I believe, for Jennifer Bristol. I'll acknowledge you next. I'm assuming you have a question for Senator Jackson. Is that correct? You're on mute.
I don't think it's necessarily a question. I just wanted to share as someone who's lived in this neighborhood for 25 years, almost 25 years. I've been involved in the parks and the jog run and in my community. And I just want to share with the politicians and with the police officers, this is the first time I'm ever afraid to walk my dogs at night. That's never been the case, ever. When I first moved here from Queens, I didn't even know Inwood existed. I thought it was the Bronx. I never felt uncomfortable.
Oh, shut up.
But now that my dog, my dogs want to go out at midnight, I'm like, oh my goodness. And that happened the other night. I walked in from my apartment at like 9 p.m. and I found out a block away on Sherman, there was a shooting. And I just don't know. I don't have any answers. I don't really have any questions because I'm kind of dumbfounded, but between the shootings, between the bikes, you go on the sidewalk and you have delivery men coming. You cross Broadway and you'll have scooters going both ways when you have the right of way. It's just really dangerous and it's really sad. And that's kind of really just what I want to say. And since we have the ears of the politicians, just whatever you can do to make us feel, because this is the first time in 25 years, I think I want to move. And I've never felt that way. I live right across from the park. I love the park. I love the neighborhood. But it just, if I can't go outside after dark, I just think that's terrible. That was it. Thank you.
All right.
Mayor, quick response. I mean, I hear you loud and clear, and that's why everyone has to be aware of their surroundings before they cross. And believe me, I do. I look both ways.
Yeah.
And even when I'm driving, before I make a left turn or open the car door, you have to look. But you think it's only up here? It's not only up in Northern Manhattan. It's everywhere in the city. I hear it in Queens and Brooklyn, all over the place. And just Jennifer, just point of reference, I am not a politician. I'm an elected public official.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So I know we have a few other hands raised, but I want to allow the Assemblywoman or their representative to speak as well. And then I believe we have a representative from Gail Brewer. Is Borough President on, or is that you, Natalie?
Hi, Curtis. How are you?
I think Sharon would need to try to attend. I'll ask her.
Okay, got it. So we'll go to Orlando next.
Hi, Curtis. How are you? The assembly member should be joining shortly. She's just running a couple of minutes late, but she'll be joining.
Okay, got it. I'll bring her up when she's here. And we have Mariel de la Cruz also on the line. Are you representing an elected official or are you representing yourself?
I'm representing the controller here.
Okay, got it. All right, cool. Well, if you want to just give us if you want to give us an update on any initiatives that you all have been a part of or share,
Sure.
you
Yeah,
can.
so hi everybody, Maria de la Cruz here from the Comptroller's Office. You know, when there was a big discussion about allocation of the budget, right? Because the Comptroller, part of his role is to see where the monies is going in the city, give suggestions on things that can be moved a little better. And I think that one of the things that he mentioned, and I think this is something that Danielle alluded to, is the idea of needing to shift funds to mental health resources, because gun violence isn't just, you know, the gun doesn't do it itself. And why is it that people feel it's appropriate when they're angry that we're gonna respond by trying to hurt someone so deeply? And I know in a lot of parts of the city, people, you know, and here in Upper Manhattan, there have been a lot of, you know, deaths through gun violence. So there, part of what the Comptroller was trying to do with that report is say that when we allocate money to other resources, especially to, I know there's some folks on here, after school programming, and also just mental health resources in places where people need them, these things don't happen as often. So we tend to forget that we, or some of us seem to forget that the COVID is still rampant and that a lot of people have lost loved ones, and that does impact not only the livelihoods of a lot of people in different communities, right? So that might be partially the reason why, but also too, people have not dealt with the death, with the loss of our, you know, to some extent, people might feel our freedoms by not being able to do what we used to do beforehand. So I think that when we talk about gun violence, it's about like what leads to that, not just a discussion of the gun itself. I also live in the community, right? There has been a shift, and it may not feel as safe, and other places around the city also don't. But what are we doing as a community? I think, Curtis, this discussion is the right way to start speaking about this. Not just what our fears are, but what we think there could be possible solutions for folks, especially young people, not to answer with violence at whatever chance that they get. But I just wanted to put it out there in that frame. Again, what the Comptroller released was not something he released 2 days ago or in the summer, but it was released a few months ago. But it is a discussion of when we have the resources from government that say, hey, these are suggestions of how to make improvements. The suggestions are there, and it is funding and reallocation of funding, not just giving money to the NYPD. I know in lots of cases it's needed, but saying, hey, there can be also monies used for mental health resources. How are we leveraging the mental health professionals that are now working with the NYPD, right? And there were reports of how that's not working as it should as of yet. So I think that it's just it's slow, I think a little slow moving, but I know that we as a community can come together and figure out how can we support our community members, and thus see examples from other parts of the city on what they're working on to see what we could join in to make sure that we leverage all of our resources.
Yep. Thank you very much. You nailed it with the resources. Really, I mean, it's investing in our educational programs, job readiness, after-school program. And these things are mitigators for gun violence. It's not just the actual shooting. It's everything that happens before that we need to be investing in. I know you're shaking your head, Bernard, but we have to invest in communities. You can't not invest in communities and expect crime to disappear. They go hand in hand. So continue to shake your head if you would like, but that's my personal opinion. All right, so I know we have, yes.
Sorry, can we just promote Carmen to panelist?
Yes, I will. Yep, you're all promoted. Yes, so. And I will just say, there is a way to I actually shut my mouth and let Carmen speak.
To add one quick point to what Mariella just said.
Yes.
In terms of mental health resources, I think it's critical to not only look at where resources can be redirected, but also part of the problem we have right now is that Columbia Presbyterian and others have shut down psychiatric beds. We still have as many people with serious mental illness out there. The problem is we don't have inpatient facilities to treat them when they're in need of inpatient care. So I would plead with every politician on this call, if you could help us work with New York Presbyterian reopening the Allen beds, reopening the Brooklyn Methodist beds. We need resources to treat people with serious mental illness. The reason why we're seeing these random acts on the streets is because people who otherwise would be hospitalized are not being hospitalized because we're cutting capacity right and left. And that's inexcusable for society. So don't just start with how we can reallocate funds from the police, which I firmly believe in, but why don't we open up the resources that we once had pre-pandemic to deal with critical healthcare needs? And that is what's directly influencing what we see in our streets. People with mental illness are not violent. We have seen some episodes of violence connected with people with mental illness, but basically the problem is right now, we do not have the inpatient resources to treat people who are in need of inpatient care. So whatever you can do to impress upon our healthcare providers that they need to reopen the beds that were shuttered because of COVID so that we can treat people with serious mental illness, all the better for our society. And now I'll step down from my soapbox.
Okay, thank you so much, Sally. All right, I'm gonna go to the Assemblywoman. Yes, Danielle. Yes.
I wanted to just add something to what Marielle just said. I just wanted to also add on the subject of mental illness that person that was detained last week that I mentioned earlier was actually on the ground for over 20 minutes. There were 15 to 20 officers surrounding him. He was on the ground for 15 to 20 minutes. That's how long it took the ambulance to respond. So I think that while we're looking into mental health resources, we also need to understand why it is that it took all of that time for them to respond while this person was on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you. So now I think we're ready for Assemblywoman De La Rosa.
Thank you for having me, and thank you to Curtis as the public safety chair for bringing us together, and to CB12. First of all, I will say that my prayers and my thoughts are with the victims of gun violence that we have most recently experienced in our community, including the 15-year-old boy who was shot over the weekend. We have to center the experiences of, a community that is traumatized by violence, by the surge of violence. I wanted to bring just a quick update. I'm mostly here to listen, but I wanted to bring a quick update. And if some of this stuff is repetitive, because I don't know who else has spoken before me, please let me know. But we all know that on July 6th, Governor Cuomo issued an executive order declaring gun violence a disaster emergency and basically requiring some preventative measures that will be happening in communities across the states. It also creates the Office of Gun Violence for the prevention of gun violence to focus on emerging gun violence hotspots. It's $138.7 million that will create prevention programs, job programs to engage youth and at-risk communities. And, this is one approach to gun violence. I personally feel, and I think some of you may agree, that, we have right now the COVID-19 pandemic that is raging in our communities. This Delta variant is very dangerous. And that has also compounded some of the trauma that our community has felt in the last year. And this gun violence surge is now a public health matter. And we have to treat it as such, right? I completely agree with Curtis, what he said as I was coming online, which is that we have to invest in communities. Opportunity is one of the biggest deterrents to crime, right? And we need to be cognizant and realistic about the fact that if people aren't engaged in a positive way, they will turn to crime. And so I'm looking forward to continuing these conversations, not as a siloed approach, but extending out, working with all of the elected officials in our community, with organizations that actually have the expertise to not only deal with youth and at-risk youth, but also with combating the gun pipeline, the iron pipeline, as we call it, to make sure that those guns are not flowing into our community. Specifically, my office has allocated some state grant funding to Catholic Charities, who, as we know, is the host organizations for the Alianza Youth Division. So we will be meeting in the next few days with Catholic Charities to see what programming we can bring in. I love to engage with our fellow elected officials as well, so that this could be a comprehensive approach. I also want to give a little shout out to Public Advocate Jumani Williams's office. I know Philip has engaged our office and probably the rest of the offices to try and see how we can collaborate on a citywide initiative. It is not lost on me that there is several things happening at once. The gun violence we are experiencing right now is the topic of this conversation, but it also spills into, when we experience incidents of assault in our public parks, which recently happened, right? We are also seeing an increase in gang activity in our community, and that is something that we have to be realistic about. So, I look forward to working with CB12 and listening to all of you and coming up with a plan that we can work on together. Certainly, I heard some of the colleagues before I got on talk about mental health. Mental health is something that has always been a priority for me. I will encourage us to look at mental health in a separate phase, just because the stigmas surrounding mental health often are put on people who have mental health issues as a part of the violence problem. It is a completely separate problem. It may be that people with mental illness may display violence, but it is not often the case. And so, I have taken a public stand that I believe that the NYPD should not be in charge of dealing with people who are having severe mental health episodes on the streets of our communities. That should be left to the health professionals, because mental health is part of general health. And so, let's continue to engage in these conversations. And I thank you for the opportunity. I'm here to listen, and I will drop my email in the chat in case anyone wants to reach out with specific priorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us as always, and for the great updates and initiatives that you're working on. So I think we have a few questions. I see a few hands up. I'm not sure if they're for particular elected officials, but I'll take two of them now, and then I'll go to Natalie Espino afterwards. So we'll go with my friend Bernard. Bernard.
So I have a question for, was it Lieutenant Andrea? I'm sorry, the representative of the 34th, right?
Tavares.
Okay. So you said that when you were talking about some of the shootings or some of the holdups, that you said they feel as though they can shoot somebody when they resist handing over their chains or whatever, right? In some of the gun violence. So I was wondering, why do you think, or do you have an answer to why you feel that they do feel that now they can actually engage in these sort of things? I guess is he on?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So what we've been seeing from the evidence from the videos is, as soon as the victim refuses to comply, they are not afraid to shoot. Why do they do it? Why do they feel like that? I'm not going to speculate. Every situation is different, and every person is different. So they seem to be more embraced, though. They seem to be more courageous on doing whatever they're doing, and that's what I can do tell you.
Okay, that's my question.
Claudia now.
Hi, thank you so much for holding this. I wanted to jump in on the subject of noise, because the precursor to all the violence was extreme noise. And so the extreme noise began, and I do think it was an after thing of COVID, or during thing of COVID, obviously, in May 2020. And the noise signaled the anger and the aggression that's now escalated to the point of the gun crisis that we're in. And on the point of the gun crisis, the never-ending fireworks that we had, they disrupted the shot spotter technology. Some of the motorcycles and dirt bikes with the altered mufflers were actually sporting gunshot sounding mufflers. So those were actually disrupting, I guess, the shot spotter technology, and at the same time glorifying the gunshot sounds. And so I wanted to jump in on the subject, because it seems like it is a warning sign. And I wanted to ask what's being done as a way of trying to disrupt the cycle before the anger goes so far that now we have actual guns, not just sounds of guns. And that I got involved in this because of the noise, the dirt bikes were so loud beforehand, or the motorcycles or the cars, all of which is actually illegal for them to be so loud. The fireworks are also illegal. So I'm just wondering what's being done at that point, obviously also to try to create other programs, other outlets, but what's being done to try to stop the noise before it escalates into further violence.
All right. Well, I could do tell you that the 3-4, they conduct multiple operations with DEP, where we pretty much we do the car stop, and DEP with the sound meter, we're issuing the summonses to address the loud muffler and what you were saying. It sounds like shots fired, actually.
Is that something that is routinely being done, or was that just because I sort of heard about it several months in, but are there routinely people with the decibel readers out there who are able to enforce the noise code?
Well, like I say, it was a joint operation with us and them. We were doing that every Thursday. Now, since everything started going more violent, let's say, we stopped doing it because of the manpower that it was taken away from us. So we hadn't done it in the past 2 weeks.
So I guess my question would be, to everybody on the call, what can be done moving forward, that there are resources to try to intervene at that stage and try to direct things into a more positive direction rather than a downward spiral?
Well, that was something that that the elected officials did mention earlier when Governor Cuomo declared the state of emergency for gun violence disaster. There's like $137 million that's available now for communities across the state to come up with gun prevention programming, job readiness programming, maybe alternatives to incarceration sorts of programming. So I do think that, and also there's now a Office of Gun Violence Prevention, which I think is greatly needed now to help mitigate some of those things. I think Assemblywoman De La Rosa mentioned that in her remarks. So that's what I think. I think that is a step in the right direction. I'll yield to any of the electeds to add any additional statements. I saw you jump back on, Carmen.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say overall, right? I think that there is more that can be done as far as like slowing down our community, right? I've talked a lot about making sure that we are actually prosecuting reckless driving in our community. We've seen, and I've seen the notices of pedestrians being struck. I think that is on the increase. I haven't seen the data, but I firmly support us, going after these reckless drivers that are making the popping noises and doing that type of activity, and engaging in this type of activity. But I also think that it has to be a more holistic approach, right? I've talked about us not weaponizing noise in our community. I think that there's different types of noise, right? There's noise that is clearly reckless behavior that should be penalized, that is illegal. Dirt bikes are illegal. People riding dirt bikes on a sidewalk, or even, motorcycles on a sidewalk, which I've seen happen, should be penalized. We need to work with our NYPD in order to stop this type of behavior. But there are different types of noise that come from different places. I don't necessarily agree with that there are always warning signs of violence. I think that violence in communities happen when there are not opportunities that are present. I think that the COVID-19 pandemic and having people cooped up in their apartments without the necessary financial support that they need has contributed to illegal behavior in our community. And so, I just wanted to share those thoughts, but definitely agree with Curtis. Some of this money, we will be working to see how we can bring it into our communities, to see how we can think outside of the box and think creatively. Unfortunately, all of these things have kind of come together to compound the urgency of the matter right now. And I think all of us are in agreement that it's an urgent matter and we need to deal with it right now. So I just wanted to give those points.
Thank you very much. So
Thank you.
I'm going to take a few additional community comments, but I want to go back to one additional elected official. I don't want to have all, I like to mix it up a little bit. So I'm going to turn it over to Natalie Espino with the Borough President's Office now. Then we'll go back to a community comment afterwards.
Hello, I'm sorry I look a little bit dim here, but this is me under a light bulb in front of a ring light. This is as bright as it gets in my my little cave apartment, which I adore. Natalie from the Manhattan Borough President's Office, she conveys her regrets. She is delayed at a couple of other speaking engagements. But I know that the Borough President joined the Community Board 12 last week for the walk through the parks. She spoke with many of you who are on this meeting now. And we certainly want to listen to your concerns. I, like others have said, this is, there are a lot of moving parts here. But, the Borough President has been, very steadfast in her advocacy for the psych beds at Allen, for mental health services in general, for social workers in every school, because, the violence doesn't just happen by itself. There are all these other complicated conditions that make it very possible. I can certainly, I appreciate the folks from the precincts are here. I can certainly attest to the fact that yes, on the weekends, we do have more police presence here on 207 in this area. I was definitely stuck behind a checkpoint on Friday night on the University Heights Bridge. So that is happening. And so whether or not other solutions need to be explored. I would also just, as a member of this community, again, and I know that the Assemblywoman spoke to this, but I think we just need to be very careful that, there's not a gray area. There's not causality between noise and firearm violence. And that's if we, there is, aggressive quality of life issues that take place. There are aggressive acts that also come with noise. There are aggressive acts that come very silently as well. But I think we need to make a really definite distinction between folks hanging out on the sidewalk, perhaps later than some of their neighbors would like, perhaps playing music louder than they would like, and the ability to negotiate that coexistence in this neighborhood with causality of violence. So precursor in its most literal sense, I have no objection to. Prae, before, cursus, trajectory, so just happens to come before on the trajectory. I use my classics degree every day. That's fine, but I caution against thinking that there's a causality here. And because I don't think it moves the plot along here for the two issues that we have to deal with, whether they're the quality of life that impacts people's health versus violence that affects people's health and our safety as a community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And please give our regards to the Borough President or us. It was great seeing her at the walk in the park last week as well. So we're going to go back to a few comments, questions from community. Please correct me if I'm not pronouncing your name properly. Sinya Molina?
Yes, hi, Ksenia.
Ksenia, okay.
I wanted to follow up on that topic. There has been discussion in our community from several members who have been so normalized by the excessive noise that when there was real danger in their area and in their homes, including fires, that they were so used to the excessive noise and the disruption that they didn't even heed the signs of the fire and the need to evacuate their buildings until they saw smoke. And I think that even though it's not clear about the causality of the noise leading to specifically gun violence, I think as a community, we're all experiencing such a normalization of disruption and noise without city agencies like parks and the police department addressing it properly, that we've all become kind of resistant to taking it seriously. And that could actually lead to potentially physical harm in situations like fires, for example.
Okay, thank you. Did you have a question or a comment about your issue with the park?
I'd like to know what can be done to help protect people against this risk, because it could be a very serious physical risk.
Is that question for a particular person, or I mean, there's?
I'm not sure. I don't know exactly what the roles are for all the panelists, but would throw it out there to whoever is best able to answer that question.
Well, I could tell you the 3-4 does address the noise, and I know in this area it's very noisy with the music and the loud cars and the dirt bikes. Like I stated before, the dirt bikes, we've been trying to confiscate them if they are illegal. The noise with the music, we do remove speakers when we go to certain person and ask them to lower the music. They lower it at the time, but then if I gotta come back 10 minutes later, obviously he doesn't care about the speakers, so we do remove the speakers. So that's how we've been addressing that issue.
Okay, now I'm gonna go back to Alan Gardner right now.
Okay, thanks, Curtis. This goes out primarily to law enforcement, but it can go out to anybody else who's an elected official who has a view on it. I'm listening to what's being said. I've been part of these meetings from time to time over the last, year and a half, Curtis? Something like that. I'm a defense lawyer for 35 years, so I kind of know a lot about what NYPD can do and what it cannot do. And the enforcement of the noise, the enforcement of the dirt bike ATV issue, and they're not just illegal on the sidewalk, Ms. De La Rosa, they're just illegal. They can't be ridden down the street.
Yes,
They're
I'm
not-
aware.
Okay, but when you said on the sidewalk, I was not sure. So
No, I
wanted
said
to
I
be
see
sure.
them. I've seen them on the sidewalk.
Yes, that's bad. That's really bad, but it's bad
Yes.
enough you're riding down Broadway, popping wheelies and creating all kinds of noise issues and safety risks. Now,
Absolutely.
I'm curious with the commanding officer, what work has NYPD done in trying to strategize since the beginning of the pandemic, when all these problems began, when 311 has been flooded with noise complaints upside down and frankly backwards, and I know you're aware of that, when they've been 311 calls about the dirt bikes, about the ATVs, about the unmuffled cars, and somebody referenced, I think it was Claudia, how they can set off the shot tracker, and that's the single pipe tailpipes that cough and spit like a drag racing car. They sound like gunshots. So we've heard that you can't chase the dirt bikes because it creates a public safety issue. I have some issues with that, but I won't say that you're completely wrong there. But what strategy sessions have you guys, has the department engaged in to come up with new strategies that could help really reduce these problems? Because we see dirt bikes get seized once in a blue moon, but they still proliferate. And I've actually heard in this neighborhood that the problem has expanded beyond Broadway and Amsterdam all the way over to Edgecombe. And I know that I know that NYPD has a right to approach individuals. So if somebody's playing loud music at 2 o'clock in the morning, all right, which is just unacceptable, period. 1 o'clock in the morning is unacceptable. All right. And you go and they turn it down, Captain. If one of your guys goes or 2 cars go, and then they have to come back 20 minutes later, do they ask for ID? They have a right to ask for ID.
Are you serious?
I'm serious.
Hello,
Why don't you read? Do you know the case law? on
talking about right now?
Do you know people DeBoer?
All right, so
You know
we're
people be DeBoer?
I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop the
There's case law on this.
Are you
I'm well
serious?
aware of it.
Alan,
Wait, Curtis, let me just say this. Curtis, let me just say this.
Did he really just ask cops to go talk to people at 2 in the morning playing music?
Listen,
Are you
Is this
kidding
what
me?
we're doing?
I've been in an apartment where the
Is this really what's going on right now?
I have to. I'm going to mute. That was his comment. I muted him, and I'm going to mute you also, Francisco, just because I want to move the conversation forward. I don't know what the comment or question was going to be, but I had to have to move forward. So I'm going to now. I saw Assemblyman Taylor on the line. Al, are you there still? If not,
yes,
okay,
yes, I am here. I'm just logging in, I'm multitasking. My apologies for the delay. Definitely an interesting conversation, and I will listen a little bit longer before I weigh in.
Okay, got it. No problem.
Thank you.
So
Hey, this is Lieutenant Zambrano from the 33rd Precinct. If I
Yes,
could
I'm
just
sorry.
add
Yeah.
a little bit of, to piggyback on what the lieutenant from the 34th Precinct was saying. I know people are concerned about the dirt bikes, and believe me, it's a big concern. I don't know if you filled in a little bit, but we do a lot of joint operations with Parks Department, DEP. Not only that, what we started doing going forward is, as somebody in the panel and the gentleman before me mentioned, is dirt bikes, ATVs, four-wheelers, they're illegal, period. Whether they're on the street, on the sidewalk, in somebody's backyard, they're illegal to operate. They're not legally registered to be running on the New York City street. So what we started doing now, and and there's people listening who may spread the word out there, is that the minute we see an illegally one of these vehicles, one of these dirt bikes, four-wheelers, or unregistered bikes, which half of them are stolen, whenever we see them in the street, we approach them. If they're just there parked, they're illegal, we take them. We invoice them, and we take them with us. I don't know if you guys have seen I've seen the pictures where we take hundreds of them, and nobody claims them because they know that they're illegal to begin with. And then we take them, and then the city will dispose of them. That's one. Whenever we see large crowds of dirt bikes going up and down Manhattan, whether they're through the highway, through the streets, because they're a hazard, we have a lot of our helicopters, aviation will follow them, whichever way they go. And our main goal is to get to wherever they go, wherever they, park them, wherever they store them, and following with that, along with other investigative units that we have, we'll follow with video surveillance, and then what we do is we target the locations where they're going, and we take them from them wherever they store them. We get search warrants, we get subpoenas, we get, video, we get images, we get surveillance on them, and that is how we attack that issue. As far as the noise goes, we started addressing a lot of the quality of life issues. I know for a while we were concerned with, stop and frisk and a lot of the guns off the street, but as we got to go back to the broken windows theory. You got to address the small issue. So I believe in the saying, you address the little things, and the bigger things will take care of themselves. We address the double parking issue. I know there's too many cars and not enough parking spaces in New York City. We address the double parking on a regular basis. As far as my command, parking summonses and move-in violations summonses have doubled since last year. Why? Because there's so many more cars on the streets. Double parking issues. Same thing as the grills on the sidewalk. I always tell people, I know some people just want to enjoy barbecue, but I always tell them, listen, do me a favor. Number one, you cannot have open flame barbecue grills on the sidewalk. We try to be courteous and we try to understand that this is where people live. And people always don't have a good time. But we always give them a warning. You cannot have an open flame grill on a sidewalk. We always give them a warning because we don't want to just go, kicking people's, as people say that we kick their grills down, down on the sidewalk. We don't do that. We tell them, listen, you cannot do that. You cannot play loud music. We try to give them warnings, and if warnings don't work, then we issue summonses and we invoice whatever they have, whether it's a grill, whether it's a speaker, whether it's a bike, and even illegally parked cars. Half the time, when they don't want to move them, we tow the cars away. And then people will show up at the precinct saying, why did you tow my car? Well, because it was illegally parked, number one, or it was abandoned in a New York City street. No plates, fake plates, expired plates. That is in itself an abandoned vehicle. And we always, we told them, and then people get upset as to why we're towing their cars, and we always tell them it is an illegally registered vehicle parked in a New York City street, and you cannot do that. Just following up on what the lieutenant from the 34th precinct said, we are trying, and we're working with other agencies as far as the noise and the fireworks. I don't know if you guys were aware, we had a task force with the New York City Sheriff's Department, tracking down where people were purchasing the fireworks. They're still doing it. We just don't make it public, but they're currently going after those cases where people are going to PA, going to other states, buying truckloads. I'm talking about thousands of dollars worth of fireworks coming over here to New York City and unloading them and making, tripling their money, because that's a big business right now. But we have task forces that are addressing that. We have task forces that are addressing the noise violations. And we have task forces and teams of officers that are addressing the dirt bike issue. So believe it or not, the NYPD and other city agencies is working towards it. As long as some of the gun violence that we're seeing a spike in. So just piggybacking what the 34 lieutenant was saying, we are working hard on that. And I know people may not see a lot of officers out there, but as Lieutenant Tavares mentioned, on the weekends we're flooding the areas with more officers. Officers, who kind of usually work administrative functions. We're deploying all our resources out into the streets to kind of prevent it, also with police presence. I don't know if I answered anybody's questions.
You did. Thank you very much. And I just want to circle back around to Alan to pose his question. Not any additional comment, but Alan, could you please pose your question succinctly to be answered, and then we can move on from there.
Sure. I'm sorry, sir, the last speaker. Can you tell me who you are? I didn't hear it. It escaped me. I'm
the Special Operations Lieutenant in the 33rd Precinct, Lieutenant Zambrano.
Thanks, Lieutenant. I really appreciated what you just had to say very much. It largely answered my question. And the reason in attacking gun violence, I'm just curious if you agree. You mentioned broken windows, and we have to be very careful, all right, about lines that have been established, right? Lines in the law, changes in law, case law, and that sort of thing. But when people aren't listening to officers who are trying to be reasonable at odd hours or at other times, I've always felt, and I'm a defense lawyer who's fought hard for my clients, all right? I've done many suppression hearings, challenging police activity. We all have jobs to do, right?
Yes.
But, I still think that the best cop is a cop who gets a gun off the street and tells the truth about how he did it. And doesn't make up a story to make it sound right if it wasn't exactly right. I don't like guys on the street being mistreated, but is there something wrong in your mind when there's loud noise going on with asking people for their ID? Because that often weeds out, all right, the people who are out there just having a good time, maybe when they shouldn't. And then people who are out there who might have a weapon on them, or who might have a warrant if it's checked in the computer and that sort of thing, which is a way to use police strategies to try and find out who the real problem people are out there. Does that make any sense?
It does. Like you said, so if it's like, let's say 2, 3 in the morning, we try to give people warnings, and most people, who are playing some sort of music or maybe have a small gathering in front of the building, most people listen. Most people will say, you know what, no problem, officer. I'll keep the music down, or you know what, I'm going to shut it down. It is late. You're right. I don't want to disturb my neighbors. But there's those few individuals who think it's okay. Once we leave, we literally turn the corner and they blast the music and they keep going, they keep doing whatever they want to. Then we come back around and we get their ID, because it's, like you said, we are probably going to issue a summons. And if the individual happens to have a warrant, is on one of our, happens to have an ICA for robbery, it was a person of interest for robbery, a gun, right, or something like that, or a grand larceny, a burglary. Most people who were out at that time disobeying the law, it's not their first time, and they've done other other offenses. I don't want to call them crimes, but other kinds of offenses, whether it's minor or major crimes. But they've done some other things in the past. So whenever we come up to an individual, and now they start giving us the runaround. Well, no, we gave you a warning. Let me have your ID. And then, at that point, it's I always tell people, listen, we start from the bottom. It's up to the other person to kind of escalate. And I'll preach that to my officers. We always want to start as low as possible, because it can go from just an individual who's maybe wanted on a robbery, but he's complying with us. You understand? And he could be, you know what? No problem, officer. Here's my ID, and then he has a warrant, and we take him in, and he could be just as pleasant as anybody else. But it could be that individual that as soon as we approach, he starts yelling, cursing, making a scene for no reason, and that elevates us to wherever he wants to go. I don't know if do I make any sense on that one?
Yeah, you do. I mean, the idea, sir, is to keep it from escalating, to be polite.
Yeah.
The old courtesy, professionalism, and respect, right?
Great.
Expecting the same back, and then responding appropriately, all right, within legal limits. And the officers, I assume, are being trained how to handle these situations.
Yes.
Right?
So we
looking to keep the escalation level low, but doing what they have to
Alan,
do.
So I have to move on to the next question.
Thank you for that explication. That was really good.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Alan, for the question, and thank you for Lieutenant Tavares for answering. So we have a few more hands, and we're going to just wrap this up. So I think we've covered the concerns. We all know their issues, and I think we all agree that we need more. We want better for the community. That's the mutually agreed, I guess, statement for the evening. So I want to just turn over to a final few comments or questions that we have. I'm going to go with Eve because we've heard Sally already. We'll come back to you, Sally, but I'll go with Eve first, and then we'll end with Sally Fisher. I don't see any additional hands at that point in time. So Eve, and then Sally, and then Lynn, and that'll be it.
Thank you, Curtis. I just wanted to kind of bring up one of those things where I hope we can all agree that illegal drug sales do contribute to gun violence on the street. And based on my experience living in this neighborhood, I have seen a couple of locations where the illegal drug sales are being sold pretty much every day, Monday through Friday. And the illegal drug, I'm not talking about marijuana, I'm talking about heroin, I'm talking about crack cocaine. And essentially the area is not only flooded with drug dealers, but it's also flooded with people who actually do need help, the people who are using drugs. So the two questions I have is one, probably someone from the precinct. Is there any active investigations? Obviously you cannot comment, but is there anything being done to address the drug selling issues within the community? And the second question, I'm not really sure who can answer this. Are there any community outreach sources that can help the users to get, help of some sort? Get them help that they need. They are using on the streets where they buy it, they use it. And I'm looking at it right now from my window. And it's essentially been going on since last year and has not been addressed. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody hear me?
Well, I could tell you that narcotics obviously address this condition. When talking about the dealers, they constantly come to my precinct. They do bring arrests. And obviously, I'm not going to be specific about any type of location, but I know that they have a couple of long-term cases going on right now in the 3-4. That's mostly narcotics, address the condition of the drug sales. With the users, I don't know anywhere where they could get help, but I know if you could call 311, and I'm sure they'll be directed in the right direction. And the biggest issue with that is I cannot help you unless you want help. So actually maybe family members, maybe they are more able than us to for them to look for help, to to help them so they look for help for themselves. That's all I have.
Sally.
Hey,
Yeah, I think again,
Senator
you're
Brown.
saying, I think,
Sorry. Wait 1 second. Directory.
Following up on Lieutenant Tavares, as he said, we have a lot of ongoing investigations. A lot of times they don't, people are not really aware when we have long-term cases. The NYPD and a lot of law enforcement agencies are gearing their efforts towards long-term cases just because of how much more of an impact the prosecution and the sentencing is gonna have than a shorter term, kind of like a pickup arrest where I show up and I kind of just pop up on somebody either selling a bag or maybe in possession of whatever drug they're having. We kind of did away from the quick arrest. We still do it, but they, because of all the sentencing laws and how much conviction rates have dropped and how much time people were getting, we're moving more towards long-term cases. And with that said, yes, I understand what you're saying. That kind of gives the idea that nothing's being done, but in all reality, a lot of these individuals are always being watched, and it takes some time for us to build bigger, whether it's conspiracy or criminal enterprise cases, and they go away for a longer time rather than us arresting them today for a small sale and then they come out 2 days later. If that, sometimes they come out the next day. But when we do long-term cases, they're not going to come out for a few years. So it creates a bigger impact to their friends, to their colleagues, whoever is selling down the block. They're going to say, well, shoot, Johnny down the block, he's going away for 5-7 years instead of going away to Rikers for a month and coming back to doing the same thing he was doing. So that's just, I don't want you guys to think we're not. We do a lot of long-term cases now, and we still do some of the, as we call it, the, pick up arrest or the quick buy and bust, stuff like that. We still do it, but not as much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is actually extremely helpful. Thank you.
And by all means, listen, whenever you guys see that repetitive sale, feel free to call your precinct. Feel free to get a hold of your precincts, like, we call them the NCOs, the neighborhood coordination officers. The way we also address that is by putting more cops in the area, having them doing more community visits out in the street, out in the corners, talking to more people. A lot of these people who are selling on an everyday basis, that once they see the cops, they'll stop, they'll pause. So the more cops we have, if you make us aware that, let's just say on 179th in Amsterdam, 179th in Broadway, they're selling every day from 3 to 6 or from 3 to 9. They're selling every day, and these are the individuals. What we're going to do is we're going to direct our resources over there in between those times, and they're going to get the point. They're going to be like, oh, my God, the cops are coming over here. You know what? Let's just shut this down for now. And if they move, we're going to keep kind of, addressing the little pockets of drug sales they have. We may not always lock them up because we also have to set up on them and watch them, but we're also deterring it from happening. We're preventing it from happening just by police presence.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Thank you very much. We're gonna move on to Sally Fisher.
Yes, I think the last comment sort of reflects the limitations of our capacity for treating people with substance use disorders. There is the Washington Heights Corner Project. But again, when they shut down the beds at Allen Pavilion, those were also beds that would treat people with substance use disorders. I want to thank Gail, Robert, and Carmen for taking this issue seriously. And I hope that you have New York Presbyterian on the speed dial and you'll call them every morning asking when we're going to get our beds back. What I wanted to address specifically, though, is the incident in the park. There was a walkthrough last week, which unfortunately I couldn't make, but it seems like the reaction of our electeds is enforcement. And what I would say is that was a random act. What we need is opportunity. Inwood Hill Park is our last forest and wetlands. It is an amazing classroom for environmental education. I think what we need to do, rather than having a million cops buzzing around, is we need to engage our kids who are already suffering from substandard education in our schools in the natural environment. If we did that, if the parks were places that were used 24/7 or 12/8, I guess, then people would see that it's not a place to commit crimes. But again, I think our focus should not always be on enforcement. It should be on opportunity. And that's opportunity for our kids that don't have opportunities comparable to people in other community board districts. So I will shut with that, but just when you're thinking enforcement, think opportunity and how can we draw our community into the parks so that they're utilized and don't become a place where random acts of violence can happen. And with that, I will say good night to everyone from the Hudson.
Okay, good night, Sally. Thank you very much. All right, so we have just a few more comments, and I think we're pretty much on time to end at 7:30. So we have Lynn. People keep raising their hands and then lowering their hands, so I'm getting confused on who has a question and who doesn't. But it seems like Lynn, Wendy, and Bernard. And that'll be it for this evening. Lynn, take it.
This is Lynn. Should I go?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Hopefully everybody can hear me. First, big shout out to Curtis and everyone on the committee for doing this in the summer when, as he mentioned at the get-go, it's not required. So appreciate it, and being responsive to the community, really, really appreciate it. The question is for the officer from the 3-4. I suspect that this is going to fall into that bucket of ongoing investigations, and I raised it on our last call. On West 204 between Vermillia and Broadway on the north side of the street, what looks like to the casual observer, drug business. I mean, they've set up, again, I could be wrong, I could be reading what's going on wrong, and it's an innocent whatever, but they've set up like a tent, like you have at street fairs to protect them from the sunshine. When I mentioned this on the last call, and Captain Bello, his comment was oblique, which made me think that he said something like, we're aware and we've reported it to the appropriate people or the appropriate channels. So I just want to call out that seems like it is still happening. And that's right near the post office. So I have this vision of little old ladies, little old viejas going to the post office, and if something goes down, something bad could happen. So I just wanted to call this out, stress, can that be put at the top of the list, or just to call it out, and I'll be quiet. Thank you.
I'm sorry, ma'am. What was the
I would
location?
like to call out the fact that sounds like targeting a group of young men that are congregating on the street. And I think that we shouldn't criminalize recreation.
No, I agree. And that's why I said, I don't know, to the innocent bystander, that's just what it looks like with, bicycles are coming and going and dirt bikes are coming and going to this. People are getting in and out of cars. So again, I don't know. I'm just saying, what I see, that's all. With that caveat, if I agree with you, this could be something that is innocent and people just congregating and hanging out.
Ma'am, what's the location?
It's on West 204 between Broadway and Vermillia, and it's on the north side of the street.
Okay, that's within the 3-4, and your comment has been noted.
Thank you so much. And again,
sorry, I just need to jump in again. I made this comment on the Parks Committee, and I think it's especially important that during COVID, we're not criminalizing recreation and people congregating outside, which is the safest and most responsible thing for people to be doing, so as to not be congregating indoors.
I'm sorry, I need
With
to,
that said,
Curtis.
ma'am, you also have to take into consideration that blocking pedestrian traffic as well as unreasonable noise is a violation. And as much as I want to, not criminalize young people who want to just have fun and come out of their apartment because they've been cooped up for months, we also have to take into consideration that the little old lady or the gentleman who worked for the past 12 hours to feed his children is trying to get some sleep at, maybe 9, 10 p.m. And that tent and all those dirt bikes on the sidewalk, whether a lady with a stroller or a lady with a walker are trying to make their way through, it's a little uncomfortable to ask a bunch of unknown grown men with dirt bikes and loud music, and God knows if they're maybe drinking or smoking, to ask them to move out of their way because of what their response may be. And that in itself is called blocking pedestrian walkway, and that is a summonable offense. As much as we don't want to just go enforce law, sometimes we have to look at it from the angle of those who maybe don't want to speak up because of what can happen in return. And I understand that maybe we want to let the youth enjoy themselves, but there's parks out there. There's parks and there's different areas that they can go, put a tent and have fun, because riding around on sidewalks is illegal, and that is a hazardous condition. If they hit a grown, healthy 30-year-old man with a fast-moving bike, it'll break their bone. Imagine if it hits a young child or an elderly. It is going to put him in a hospital, and God forbid even.
I'm sorry, I'd like to
I
cut in
always
for a
just-
sec, y'all. I'm
Okay.
sorry, this is Chris from Senator Jackson's office. I think this is actually not the discussion that we should be having. There was an active arrest for cocaine possession right across the street about 3 weeks ago, and it is incredibly likely this spot has been on the senator's office's radar for several months. There is active drug trade that is happening outside this building. There are pills being sold, there's cocaine being sold. It's a known drug spot. I hear Danielle's concern, but I have been in touch with the Special Narcotics Prosecutor's Office about this, and it is a very hot block. So I want to affirm what Lynn is saying. I understand Danielle's general warning about this kind of congregating, but there has been an active arrest made for cocaine possession that was acquired at this location. So I think I would like to.
Chris, if I
Yes.
could interrupt you, I don't think you should be sharing that information with this panel. I'm sure they gave you that information. That's confidential information that is shared with the senator's office. I don't think this is the forum for you to share that with.
I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I was not informed of any restrictions on sharing that information, and perhaps you and I can talk afterwards. We've also raised this with the 34th, so it's on your radar as well. So I hope that we can act on this because seems like a pretty dangerous situation.
All right, and the bottom line is that law enforcement has tools
No,
to
so we have Wendy up next, followed by Wendy up next. So Wendy, you want to take it away?
Yes, thank you so much, Curtis.
I'm sorry to cut people off, but we are at our we have to move the agenda forward, and I'm going to be respectful of everyone's time this evening, especially those who have not spoken yet. Wendy has not spoken.
Thank you so much, Curtis, and thank you for I forget who it was earlier this evening was talking about how things seem to exacerbated for the pandemic. It is true. However, I think we need to be very careful how we classify things. I think we need to be very, very, intentional about how we say things. We have to be respectful to each other, right? And respectful to each other's cultures. And I think that's part of what a lot of us see happening, which is create unity. So I'm here from We Act for Environmental Justice. And you might wonder this thing, well, we're all here for the same thing, right? We want safety in our communities. We want to be able to in the morning, not really, but so thank you again, Curtis, for putting this together. And I need to be a little bit more careful how we classify these things, innocent people, not like the words that you use are very impactful with the people that work to bring peace to our communities. So thank you, Curtis. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we have our Bernard. Is your new hand raised or just your final? At a good place because I have a baby who's jumping all over me right now, who's saying, "Get off the screen, Uncle Curtis." So I'm going to just close this meeting out. But I really want to provide an opportunity for us to come together. It's been a very challenging summer for the community, but I see the light. We're moving in the right direction. This is just going to be, this meeting would hopefully help us draft our agenda for our September 1st meeting, which is around the corner and 3 weeks away, and also to help kind of give us a little bit more direction as we enter our new community board season and we start working on our agendas in the next few months. So if you have any additional comments, questions, or concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out to the community board office. We can most certainly help mitigate and help you solve any problems you have in the coming weeks, even though we're still in recess. So thank you all for your time this evening, and we'll be in touch. Have a good night.